Good evening, everyone, and welcome to our wonderful venue. This is the SERA Fringe about clean air and clean energy, and welcome to Blundell Street, which is our home for the week. So if you want to come to any fringe about the environment in the course of Labour Conference, then we are here every evening and lunchtime, so hopefully you'll enjoy this evening and come back for more. So those who don't know me, I'm Melanie Smallman. I'm one of the co-chairs of SERA, and I am particularly happy to be chairing this meeting this evening because if anyone here is a member of SERA, you should know, because we've been emailing you about it, that for the past, I don't know, maybe 5 or more years, we've been campaigning quite hard around clean energy and clean air. And in particular, for the past couple of years, we've run a campaign asking for a new Clean Air Act for the 21st century. And it was in the Labour manifesto in the last election, and I'm particularly delighted, and I'm sure Alan will say more later, but I'm particularly delighted that there's a commitment in the latest environment statement from the Labour Party, again, to press forward with a Clean Air Act for the 21st century. So it's time we found another thing to campaign on around clean air, because our job is almost done there. So part of moving forward is to try and develop the detail and the thinking about what it is that we want in this Clean Air Act. But also, more importantly, we can't wait for that. People are dying every year through the air that they breathe in, which in this day and age is a really, really shocking fact. And so we wanted to bring together a number of people this evening who are actually moving things forward on the ground. Because while we may not have our hands on the levers of power in Westminster, across the country, Labour politicians are making a difference. So the purpose of this evening's meeting is to think about this question of clean air and clean energy together, but also thinking about it from the highest level down to the really, really local level. So we've got an amazing array of speakers, and I've asked them to be very brief to begin with so that we can have time for discussion and questions. Just to warn you, you're all in deep darkness, so this is a set for pop stars rather than politicians, hence the disco ball. So I will try my best to call you for questions, but forgive me if I can't see you because you're just pitch black. And if I've known you for 20 or 30 years and I just point to you and say that man, then again it's because I can't see who you are. Okay, so my apologies. So I'm going to try and arrange the session so that we go through the speakers in some kind of logical order, starting from sort of big picture national things and then going right down into the detail and then back up again, so a full circle. So I'm going to ask Helen Hayes to begin, and Helen is the Vice Chair of the All-Party Parliamentary Group on Air Quality.
Thank you, and good evening. What Melanie didn't say was that as well as you all being in darkness, we've got a really bright light shining in our eyes as well, so which doubly can counter the situation. But very, very good to see so many people here, and I hope everybody is having a great time so far at the conference. I've just arrived, and this is my first event. The All-Party Parliamentary Group on Air Pollution does what all APPGs do, which is to try to bring together politicians from across the political spectrum in Parliament who care about a single issue. And it does some useful work, it does some particularly good work around engaging with technology and with advances in technology on clean air, and we run a series of seminars and workshops and so on that front. And we recently produced a report on Brexit and air quality and its implications for air quality. But I'm not really going to talk about that today. I mean, if you're interested in the APPG, have a look on the website, sign up to get emails about the events and so on. But there are limits to the progress that can be made on an all-party basis, because on this agenda the government is so weak. So it is absolutely astonishing to me that in the face of a public health crisis that causes 40,000 premature deaths a year, 10,000 or so in London alone, the government would rather spend taxpayers' money defending court action than actually produce a clean air strategy that is effective and comprehensive and shows any leadership really at all on the issue. And so I just want to say a couple of things from my perspective as a constituency MP. I represent Dulwich and West Norwood in South London, which is an inner London urban constituency, where air quality is an issue across my constituency. And what I see is that my communities really understand the public health crisis, and air pollution is therefore a political issue, and it is an urgent issue. I'm contacted, I think, every single week by, in particular, parents with asthmatic children who want something to be done about the quality of the air that their kids are breathing, and they want it to be done now, not in 5 years' time, not further down the road, right away. They want the air to be cleaner because they understand the health implications of this issue. In contrast to that, we have a government that's very much pushing responsibility down, I think, to local authorities to do something about this area. That they are saying, well, you know, it's for councils to have a clean air strategy, and it's for councils to kind of do what they can. But that misses the point. It misses the point that councils are being given a lot of responsibility with this area, but they're not being either empowered or funded to do the work to the extent that they need to. And the guidance and the impetus across a range of different areas from central government simply isn't there. So one of my colleagues put it to me very well a few months ago. He said, you know, our council could be doing everything possible within its power, but it still won't have any control over the motorway that wraps around our city centre. And there are numerous areas like that where, however effective our councils are, and I'm sure we'll hear about some really good work today at local level, without a proper legislative framework from government, the progress that we need simply won't be made. I think I'm probably running out of time, so maybe I'll stop. But I think that the key thing is the sort of mismatch that we have between the action, the urgency that communities feel, some of the very innovative work that is going on with our councils, but the impact of cuts on, you know, so councils need to be empowered in terms of public health role, in terms of planning legislation and guidance coming down from central government to inform planning policy at local level, and also in terms of their public realm and streetscape works and so on. So without, I have communities coming forward with schemes that they want to implement around schools. There isn't the budget there to do that. So I'm going to stop, but very happy to take part in discussion later, and we'll hear hopefully from councils about some good work that's happening locally.
Thank you. Okay, I think the thing that really strikes me from Helen's contribution there, for people who've been coming to these clean air events for the past 5 or 10 years, is just how much has changed in terms of it coming from the grassroots and people are demanding this. Because certainly 10 years ago, people thought we were crazy in SERA talking about clean air when all everyone was talking about was climate change. But suddenly lives are affected and people really are worried about it. So it's very interesting to me. I'm going to hand over now to Simon Alcock, who is from Client Earth. So we don't have James, we have Simon, which is great. And Simon is the Head of Public Affairs for Client Earth, which, by the way, is the organisation which has been bringing some of these cases forward.
Thanks, Mel. Thanks for having me. Sorry I'm not James, but do my best. I think if anyone needed a reminder about why we're here and what we're doing is just need to look at the news this week. We had a report linking pollution coming through pregnant mothers' lungs and lodging in their placenta, affecting the unborn baby. We had a piece of research from UNICEF showing the effect that the school run has on children who live in areas of high pollution. And then the day after, there was a report linking Alzheimer's with air pollution. So it's just shocking, really, that we're in this state of affairs, which is why we, Client Earth, have been running a sort of 8-year battle against the government of both Labour and now Conservative to try and get them to do something on this. And we've won in court 3 times, and we've ended up with a plan, as Helen says, really just passes the buck to local authorities and doesn't do what we need to see. And what we'd like is a national network of clean air zones, which is done from central government. Obviously local authorities need to have a say in that, but it needs to be standardised and done properly. But we also need help and support for people to switch to cleaner forms of transport. It's not their fault. They're driving these diesel cars. Many people have been encouraged by successive governments down the years to buy these cars, and businesses also. There needs to be help there, so the changes to the tax system should be thought about, mobility credits or a scrappage scheme, things like that we need to see. Also Clean Air Act, as Mel mentioned. When we leave the European Union, there's going to be, the laws are going to be a mishmash, and how we're going to hold the government to account. We really should be adopting World Health Organisation limits on pollution, really. I just want to touch on what the Labour Party is doing, both nationally and in the various cities where they hold power. Nationally, the Shadow DEFRA team and the Shadow teams are talking a good game on this. They've got some good policy. I think the leadership, I doubt whether the leadership gets it, and if the Labour Party was to be in power tomorrow, whether we'd get the clean air zones we need, I think is still up for question, really. Looking at the cities that we've got, the Mayor of London has, he's been very ambitious on this, and if he does everything he says he's going to do, then we're going to go a long way to cleaning up London's air. Various other cities, Birmingham, we think they could do more, but they're making a good start. Southampton, as I'm sure we'll hear about, are doing well, Oxford also. But Clina's point is that we have to be guided by the evidence on this, and we should be bringing in the policies. And yes, the national government should be taking charge of this rather than being in the ridiculous position of writing public letters to various local authorities they don't think is good enough. They should actually be having some power about this. But at the same time, we should be guided by evidence, and if it means including cars in clean air zones, then we should be doing that if it's going to protect people's health. I'd just like to end really on the role of the trade unions, if I may. I think they have a huge role to play in this, both in terms of protecting workers, whether it's a bus driver going to work, whether it's a nurse going to work in a hospital, it's one of the dirtiest roads of London. There's a real issue there. But also the jobs of the future. We know this transition to cleaner vehicles and to different types of technology is coming. What jobs will there be there for people? What role are the unions playing? At least in the car industry, they seem to be sort of sticking their heads in the sand and trying to defend the fuel that's been discredited. And I think the unions have a powerful role to play here. Just finally, we've been here before in the 1950s. We had the Great Smogs. And we thought there's voices there. If you go back and read the debates in Parliament there, it seemed impossible to do anything about this. But eventually we did have a Clean Air Act brought in, and I think hopefully if we all come together and campaign for a Clean Air, we can bring a new one in that is set on proper health evidence, and we can start doing cleaning up people's air. If not, we'll have to go back to court. Thanks so much.
Last year we had trade union representatives at this meeting, and it's simply that we're just taking a different perspective. We haven't excluded them, and they haven't said they don't want to be part of it. So, some of the unions are doing really, really amazing stuff. There's more to be done, but they're partners in this. I'm looking forward to later hearing from Neil about the possible technological solutions to some of these problems, but I want to kind of move now towards the local level to hear what's going on. And I'm going to hand over to Polly Billington, who is Director of UK 100, which is a group of local authorities committed to reducing carbon emissions and cleaning up the air. But is also a member of the SERA executive, so is a great friend of ours. Polly.
Thanks very much, Melanie. Yes, UK 100 started working on clean air about this time last year because we realised that this was a clear and present danger in our cities, and that there was a determination amongst local leaders in our network to do something about it, and they needed to be able to talk together in order to be able to have a collective voice in terms of influencing how things were happening in government. We've had some progress since then. We got, in the local elections in May, we had 27 local party groups. That's not just Labour Party groups, some of them were Tory party groups and local councils committing to our clean air commitment on what they would do if they got into power. And that has made a significant change to some of the things that people are doing in power, which is important. And making sure that you get proper partnerships, involving local people, planning out dirty air. So every time somebody thinks about regenerating their city and they think about putting car parks in, you need to think again. Those kind of things are really important, and making sure that we have got a range of other activities, a range of other designs which are about active travel. Now, we have also been involved, and the important thing that Simon mentioned was the leadership that we've already seen from Sadiq Khan in London. Partly, this is a really important lesson for other local leaders, is that if you own this issue, you can make significant kinds of progress with it. He and we were able to convene 14 leaders from across England and Wales in June, which represented 20 million people, asking for greater ambition on clean air. They also combined to outline some of the innovations that you see in the brochures that you've got in front of you. And we're really proud of the fact that local leadership is starting to make a difference, because we know that local design of clean air action is important. But this is one of those things which, if you don't have national action and you don't have international action, you won't be able to do enough. So that's why we need to be able to think about the 3 things that need to happen nationally in the next year or so. The Clean Air Act might be one thing, but it's much more likely now that we will have to get clean air targets into the new Environmental Protection Bill that will be coming to Parliament either at the end of this year or at the beginning of next. And I'll just be brutal with you about the political realities of this. We need to make sure that we win this through the government that is going to be there. Now, obviously, there's a great unknown of what that government will be, but we still have to work on what currently we're working. We have to work with the realities of now. So we need to make sure that they are there. The good thing is, WHO guidelines are more ambitious than EU guidelines, and Michael Gove hates everything with the word Europe in it. So I'll take that. This is the kind of thing we've got to be thinking about. We also need to make sure that we end up with, if we're going to have those clean air zones and those charging zones that Simon's talking about, in order to be able to satisfy the residents of Helen's constituency and many others who are wanting it cleaned up now, is we need the actions that will make clean air zones work. And that is things like procuring buses correctly, changing the regulations of buses. It's only London and Nottingham that has got the power at the moment to be able to distinguish what kind of buses that they have, because they own the bus companies. Other places don't have that. We will need to change those rules. Now, those are things that are not philosophically very comfortable for a Conservative government, and obviously it would be great if we had a Labour government for many of the people in this room, but I can't wait for that. We've got to get it done now. And thirdly, we also need to be able to make the case to Treasury, bearing in mind how strict they are on money, as to how they would invest in the shift that we're talking about. And that's going to mean that we're going to have to think about how we're going to persuade them to spend money on retrofitting freight vehicles. How are we going to persuade them to support the money, to support local authorities to have those charging zones and to pay the money back over the long term? Where and how are they going to invest in the money for the infrastructure? These are not straightforward things. I will finish on a positive note. We have not only the facts in our favour, but we have more and more allies. And this is because in very many environmental campaigns, you start off talking about the planet, you finally talk about people, and ultimately you talk about their health. And people do want to know that they can be confident that the air that they breathe is not actually damaging their health. And with those kind of allies, which include business, because business needs to be able to get their shit done now as well, we have many more allies than you would expect. I'll point out another thing before I finish. UK 100 is a cross-party organisation, and therefore we have Tory-led councils who now understand that this is if this is not currently a problem for them, it's going to be a problem for them in the future. Do not underestimate the potential of cross-party agreement on this, particularly at local level. That could be transformative, and those allies could really make a difference to persuading people in the Tory government to be able to get the actions that we need. Thank you.
Thank you. And I think so it would be great. So first of all, I'm going to introduce Councillor Christopher Hammond, who is leader of Southampton City Council, which was once your job, isn't it, Helen? So you can glimpse into your future.
Thank you very much for that, Melanie. Just reflecting on what some of the other panellists have said, when I first came into politics 6 years ago, when I was elected on the council, one of the first conversations I had with an officer, senior transport officer, I said, we need to do something about electric cars. We need to look at considering what we do about air pollution. He leaned back in his chair, he looked up to the ceiling, and he said, "Councillor, we've got millions of pounds worth of cuts to find. Do you really think we've got time for these Cinderella type projects?" Now, he doesn't work at the council anymore, which has got nothing to do with me becoming leader, I hasten to say. But it just shows how far we have actually come. But, worryingly, how far we've still got to go. Why has it taken us 7 years and 3 court cases, and we are still in a position where this government is ducking national leadership to such a scale where councils like mine are left high and dry trying to implement or considering looking at a clean air zone? People are rightfully getting quite angry, and councils will do as much as we can do. My own council's had £120 million taken out of our budget, but this is a priority for us. We want to solve the problem. And it feels like every week since we started the Clean Air Zone consultation, there's been new evidence, and it gets more serious every time. So the Chinese study about 1 microgram of pollution is 1 month's worth of educational attainment, which is horrifying. When you think about our poorest neighbourhoods, usually are in some of the most polluted areas. Some of these children really don't stand a chance when you factor in other inequalities that we all know about. So we've done all the things that you'd expect us to do. We've put charge points in. We've got a package of discounts for electric vehicles. We've invested in cycle highways. And something that I'm really proud of is we managed to get through the Clean Air Fund 2.5 million to retrofit every single bus that operates in Southampton to be the cleanest, as clean as diesel can be, Euro 6 buses. That's an important step because I think it speaks to the level of commitment that a number of businesses want to make on this issue. But we have to provide that national leadership and a robust framework for them to buy into that vision. Because if we don't, it'll be a city by city or area by area basis, and businesses throughout this process have told me that's not good enough. And I think we need to push that with government. As soon as we completed a scrutiny inquiry, we launched our own clean air strategy because we knew that this wasn't just going to be a series of little projects we needed to do, but this was a whole new approach to city management that we had to do. And the clean air strategy was launched in 2016. And since then, we've been successful in every bid we've put to government to fund some of the projects I've mentioned, but also we've been effective. And the amount of NOx in the air in Southampton has been coming down over the last 3 years. And as part of the Clean Air Zone consultation, we had to do all the modelling, and we can evidence that through the projects that we've been doing. Going from this being a fringe issue to it being something that people are really passionate about. Our consultation on the Clean Air Zone, we thought we'd get about 600-700 responses, which is similar to what we get for our budget. We got over 9,000 responses in our city, which was absolutely phenomenal and became the biggest consultation that we've ever done. Now, you think about some of the controversial decisions that councils have had to take, and mine is no different from that, but we put an issue out there and people engaged with it. It became a bit of a political football, actually, because the local Conservatives signed up to UK 100's policy pledge. But after the election, the local MP, not Helen, the Conservative one, Royce Smith, got involved and decided to take the Trump campaign book of campaigning and spread a lot of disinformation, a lot of lies. And unfortunately, a number of people started to believe what they were hearing about these zones being prohibitive, including all cars. We were consulting on Class B. But nevertheless, it has raised it up the profile. Councils will do what they can, but our experience is one of the 5, and I'm the only one that got the letter which from Theresa Kofi, which slapped me on the wrist for giving the longest consultation possible, because I thought it was necessary. And we are the only port city of the 5, and I wanted to make sure that we heard from as many of those companies that would be affected, and that they had their chance to tell us what needed to happen. With that national leadership, with that local drive and support, we can tackle this, but just one component isn't going to be enough. We feel, as a city, that we've been marched to the top of the hill and we've done everything that the government encouraged us to do, and we've had a couple of court cases in between, and thank God we have got client who have kept this up, the political agenda, and held this government to account. But we've now looked behind us, and the government has watered down its promises, moved the goalposts, and left us, we think, high and dry. Well, we don't think that's good enough, and we're working with our partners at UK 100, who've helped amplify our voice on the national stage and with government to make sure that cities can adequately deal with that silent killer that's affecting most of us in this country.
I spent 10 years as a councillor, and I know how hard it is, and that on the day-to-day business you're dealing with what we always talk about, the constituency war. You know, it's all pathetic drama, and it's really good to hear you talking about how you're really, I mean, it's not easy, so well done, thank you, I'm grateful for that. And Tom, it's your turn. Councillor Tom Hayes, who is the Executive Ward Member for Safer and Greener Environment in Oxford City Council, who I'm sure is going through similar challenges and excitements.
Thanks, Melanie. I've got 3 minutes, so I'm going to tell the story about what Oxford's doing to clean up our dirty air in 3 numbers. And these are 22.7, 2020 and 3.25. And with the first number, 22.7, that's the success we've had in the last year at reducing nitrogen dioxide in our city's environment. So we've seen a 22.7% drop in dirty air in our city in 1 year alone. That's a pretty dramatic drop, it's remarkable actually, and we know that because we have consistent, continuous monitoring in the city. We recognise the importance of an evidence base so that we can make informed policy choices, even if government only actually look at 3% of the data we get from our monitoring stations, which is just almost like they don't want to actually find any dirty air. And the drop that we've had is basically showing that we're going in the right direction. The decision that we took about 2 or 3 years ago to introduce an ultra-low emission zone, which brings our buses in the city centre up to the cleanest possible standard that we can get with diesel, a Euro 6, is paying off. But it's also pointing out something else to us, and that's taken us to the second number, which is 2020. So last year, Oxford City Council proposed that we would bring in a zero emission zone from 2020. Over 3 5-year phases, we would have a zone within which diesel and petrol vehicles would be banned, which expands outwards in size until 2035. And in looking at the data that we just got in the last year, we were thinking, geez, that's quite a big drop. You know, we proposed a zero emission zone because we were seeing the number plateauing just above the legal limit for 2 years before we proposed a zero emission zone. And it got us thinking, do we really need to have a zero emission zone? Do we need to be going down the road having something so bold and adventurous? And we figured, yeah, we do. We absolutely do. And there's a number of reasons for that. The first is, we can reduce air pollution below legal limits, but there is no safe level of air pollution. We know the devastating effects it has on everyone in our country, but we know as Labour councillors that it has a devastating effect on the most vulnerable, the poorest people in our society, the people who depend most on labouring power. So we have to plough on. The second reason is that we can bring in a zero emission zone, but that's not going to check all the vehicles on our roads off those roads. We need to be thinking creatively, so we're looking at new demand management approaches, whether it's a congestion charge or workplace levy, because you may have more electric vehicles on the road, but there's no point sitting in a quiet vehicle that's not polluting if you're in a traffic jam. And then the third reason really is electromobility. We're not seeing anywhere near the speed and scale of a shift from the internal combustion engine over to electric vehicles. And we know partly why that is. It's partly because the car industry doesn't want to make that big switch. We know the fossil fuel industries are desperate to try and stop it. We also know that government aren't really doing anywhere near as much as they need to encourage it. So anything that we can do to encourage more electric vehicles, such as there will be vehicles, is important. Which brings me to the third number, 3.25. And this is probably my favourite number, partly because as a council we've had some success at wrenching money out of this Tory government, which is almost impossible to do, but we've done it. And that 3.25 million is being dedicated towards tackling the problems that were raised by all of the businesses and all of the individuals who responded to our consultation. And it was great to hear Chris talking actually about how the consultation that Southampton launched was so positive. We didn't get 9,000 responses, we got 750, which was good for us. but we found that 90% of the people consulted on the zero emission zone thought that tackling air quality was important, and 71% thought we were going in the right direction, and actually that we should probably expand the zone, which was reassuring. But in terms of 3.25 million, we know that we've got to try and make the zero emission zone a practical reality. We have a covered market of independent traders smack bang in the first zone that sets off in 2020. We've managed to secure money to have electric light commercial vehicles to help them with their freight. We also know that the bus companies are seeing real challenges. They're not seeing the pace of change in technology anywhere on the scale they need. So with this money, we're retrofitting 78 buses to Euro 6, but we're also having the first 5 electric buses on the road. But a big challenge is how do we charge those buses so that we're not having 2 buses doing the same route as one, diesel. And then the third is around taxis. Taxi traders, all of us Labour comrades and colleagues will know, have been fantastic allies of the Labour movement. So how can we be supportive of them as they're going through this technological transition, both in terms of the move more towards app-based bookings, but also in terms of electric vehicles? How do we help them to overcome some of their concerns? And so we commissioned a study with Cenex which showed that a lot of the concerns about hackney and private hire drivers and owners shows that some of their concerns can be met. Electric vehicles can be bought cheaply, they can be charged simply, they can go further than people think they do. So it's about communicating that message. And then the final thing that I think I want to say is that it's great to have clean air zones. It's great to have a zero emission zone in Oxford. It's great to see Labour empowering local government making a difference. But we're doing this in the absence of that legislative framework. We desperately need Labour to be in government in order that we can properly clean up our air. Because as I was saying earlier, the people who most depend on Labour government, the poorest, the most vulnerable, the low income, they need Labour government to be legislating on clean air.
I mean, really inspiring stories so far. And what always strikes me about this is this point that, you know, if this isn't a Labour issue, I don't know what is. This is pollution that's really holding back the lives of the people that we seek to represent and care for the most. And it comes down to kind of 2 things which are slightly complicated, but maybe not as complicated as other things. One is a question of policy and politics, which I think Helen will talk about as the last speaker. But the second one is there's simply a problem with the wrong technology and old technology. So I hope now that Neil Ryan, who's Chief Executive of VRM Tech and is kindly supporting this event this evening, will fix our problems for us. That's my dream.
Tall order. Thanks for having me here this evening. So what I was going to do is, rather than talk about my company, which if anybody wants to know can just look it up, tell you a bit about a project we're involved in that aims to reduce air pollution, and also something called the Urban Heat Island Effect, which is in essence why our cities are getting hotter. So the project is called GIA Urban, project teams collaborating between the UK and China, mainly Shanghai. It's government funded via Innovate UK, and the main goal is that we produce a system that allows to see in 3D how big our pollution problem is, how wide it is, how tall it is, where it emanates from, exactly what it's made up of in terms of particulates and gases, and then also produce at a localized level a solution in terms of green infrastructure assets. So not just green roofs that you'd all know about, or trees, but when they are called into place and they are necessary to produce a list of the right types of plants, for instance, on green roofs or in specialised parks, but also man-made materials. So for instance, clean air zones, everybody's referring to zero emissions, so we're already looking at how the extra use of brake pads on electric vehicles are going to create more particulates and cause a future problem. How do we deal with that? Or CHPs, for instance, and various pollution coming from the stacks on top of the CHPs out of the vents. How do we tackle those problems as well? So as we're adding green infrastructure, it in itself can cause a future problem. So how do we deal with the current problem, reduce what's there, and also how do we deal with the future problems that are coming down the line? My own company's job is to handle all the tech. We're working with Leeds Beckett University that are handling all the green infrastructure assets, so producing a vast database of established green infrastructure assets that we've researched and they've researched from around the world, see what works, adapt that so we can bring it to a localized level, look at the climate, look at localized weather, know what works in terms of anything nature-based to see what will survive, what will have the biggest impact on the climate problems that are there, and be they the heat side of things or the actual pollution side of things. And lastly, then working with Hull University, who are giving us the sensor technology that isn't currently available today, but will be now shortly from their beta sensors that they've done, to look at in 3D how big these problems are, and most importantly, where we can, with some tomography on top of that, to see where it emanates from, to see can we find the sources of some of those problems. So our goal, in essence, I guess, is in 12 months to have the first cut of a solution. We're looking to sell this at a city level to planners effectively, and also then builders who are looking to build new developments, but on the back of the system could recommend green infrastructure assets that could be added to or nearby the various buildings that they're looking to put in place, and thereby have a localized positive effect on the community they're looking to put something in on. We're doing our research studies all over the UK and in Shanghai, and so quite like Southampton, there's a little port there as well, which I think is actually the biggest in the world and causing a massive problem. So theirs is one of the highest levels of air pollution in the world. So we get to look at the most extreme, and the UK is obviously bad in terms of its current position, but we get to see all the different types, and we get to test out these technologies now and these green infrastructure assets in both those locations, and look to produce something that will hopefully in the short term have a very positive effect. What we're looking for in terms of one of the things was asked that Labour, we can look to seek some positive input in terms of government, is looking at obviously pushing this type of approach in terms of green infrastructure assets, looking at funding these types of things at scale, because if it doesn't happen on scale, it's not going to work. And also to fund more research into the negative effects of some of the green types of technologies and things that we're looking to put in place, and protect ourselves against some of those future things that are coming down the road. Thank you.
Good. So, yeah, we're getting the story here that citizens want action, local authorities want action, technology is coming along to help us take action. So, what's missing now is the national picture, the framework to help us do that. So I'm going to ask Alan to say something about where we're going and what a Labour government will do. Alan Whitehead, for those who don't know, is the Shadow Minister for Energy and Climate Change, but also a very long-standing executive member of SERA. So another friend.
Thanks very much, Melanie. So we've heard this evening a variety of first-rate contributions, all of which, forgive me for saying this, are about parts of the elephant. And so what we've got to do is put in place the whole elephant, it seems to me. And one thing I think we need to remember in all this is that as far as bad air is concerned, although there are things such as particulates coming from brake lines and things such as that, overwhelmingly, the cause of bad air is the burning of fossil fuels in different ways. And therefore, the cleaner you can get your energy systems, and the less reliance that those energy systems have one way or another on fossil fuels, the better we're going to be in terms of the long-term prognosis for clean air. And obviously we have got to do things absolutely now. And some of those things are actually going to be shorter-term fixes for this question. But the long-term fix just has to be cleaning our energy systems up as quickly and as completely as we can. And that means green energy across the piece as far as our energy supplies are concerned. And in transport, it means electrifying our vehicle fleets, substituting diesel that goes into so much of them as quickly as possible. Now we've heard already this evening that not only does the government not take that view very seriously, but actually they've compartmentalised the question of clean air so that one department is actually beating Chris over the head in Southampton for the fact that he hasn't produced clean air zone as quickly as he might have done, whilst another department is actually making Chris's job worse for him by particular things that they're doing. So, for example, Southampton, as Chris has mentioned, Southampton's a port. A large number of cruise liners come into Southampton. They actually run on their diesel engines quite often while they're in port. It's equivalent, as I've sometimes said, of a town the size of Romsey coming into the centre of Southampton running entirely on diesel generators for 4 days. I mean, it is that bad. Are ships coming into port the responsibility of Department of Environment? No, they're not. It's Department of Transport. Department of Transport could very easily put in place a piece of legislation requiring ports to have shorter ship power for when those liners come, or those ships come into port. And that would dramatically slash the emissions coming from those ships, because they're not vehicles, and because they're not in the sights of the Department of Environment. The Department of Transport drags its feet on that sort of thing, whilst actually we are in Southampton told to clean up the results of their inaction. The Department of Business, Energy and Industrial Strategy base, most recently, or very fairly recently, has held an auction for firm power. It's a bizarre system whereby large amounts of money are paid to various energy companies for agreeing to provide power, and that means that in agreeing to power, a number of gas-fired power stations get paid quite a large amount of money, and more significantly, a number of coal-fired power stations, which were in the process are supposed to be phasing out, get large amounts of money in order to continue to produce at maximum capacity over the next few years, coal-fired power stations being one of the key bad air polluters in the country. And indeed, not only is coal-fired power stations getting all this money to continue to produce, when actually we've got quite enough power from elsewhere at the moment. But a number of new plants have come on stream as a result of these subsidies. Guess what they are? They are diesel reciprocating engines. So we now have some of our reserve power provided for by a number of the most single energy polluting devices, i.e. diesel powered engines, as a key part of our energy mix, which strikes me as just bizarre in the context of what we ought to be doing across the board about clean air and clean energy alongside it. So I think my key message is actually we need to understand that this is a cross-government, a cross-departmental issue, and is not something that admonitions from one particular department is going to solve. It needs to be everybody working together in their different ways to bring about that downward pressure on clean air. Now, as far as Labour is concerned, there is already a great deal of cooperation between shadow departments, not yet departments, but that could be different in 3 months' time, you never know. And one document, in fact, I would recommend that you put in your tote bags before the end of the conference, is this document that's come out jointly, effectively, from Bayes, from Rebecca Long Bailey, and Department of Environment, Food and Rural Affairs, Sue Heyman, which is the Green Transformation of Labour's Environment Policy. And you're looking, if you see in there, you'll see just how much collaboration between departments is going on in terms of the formation of Labour's green and environment policy. Now, we've got in there a number of key policies, such as the policy that we're going to aim to have 60% of all energy provided by low carbon and renewable means by 2030, which is a tall order but achievable with a lot of departmental collaboration. And we have in there, as Melanie has said, a new Clean Air Act to replace the previous Clean Air Act, bring it up to date with the sort of things that I've mentioned and everybody on the panel has mentioned this evening as to how we work together to get that clean air in place, get those clean air zones in place. I'm delighted that Chris absolved me of any blame of being the nasty MP who's trying to do the clean air zone over. It is my miserable opposite number in Southampton, Royston Smith MP. But I think I'll stop going on about him this evening. But just to say that we need those clean air zones, we need that immediate action, but we need to frame that in a longer term, clear sight of the goal. It is about clean energy for the future. It is about the end of dirty energy and burning of fossil fuels. And if we achieve those two things, we certainly will have clean air zones following.
Okay, so amazing, impressive, inspiring array of starting presentations. So it's now, I'm going to hand over to you for questions. So we're expecting, hold on a sec. I want you to be as impressive as the panel, is what I was going to say. Also, before we do that, I just want to do an advert for SERA. So anyone who isn't a member of SERA, I would encourage you to join. There's copies of our magazine by the door, and you can just sign up. You can sign up right now, actually, if you get your phone out and go to sera.org.uk. You just have to press a button and put your credit card in, and then in future, when you come to these, you know that you've paid for your buffet and for your drinks. It's not someone else that's done it. So that's what we spend our money on, is campaigns and organising events like this, and we can't do it if we don't have members paying regularly into our funds. So, please do that. Also, then, once you've done that, come back tomorrow, because we've got 3 events. We've got one at lunchtime about sustainable food, and there's vegan lunch provided in that one. Then there is our fantastic SERA rally. If anyone hasn't been to one of those before, I recommend it. I'm not chairing it, so I get to sit down and enjoy it a bit more this year, but it's always an exciting event. That's at 6 o'clock here tomorrow, and after that there's then free drinks with the Sustainability Hub reception. So just don't move from here tomorrow, because it's all there, and all of your food and interesting environmental discussions will be catered for by SERA. Right, so I'm going to look for questions. One question that I want to ask, so maybe what I'm going to do, because there's so many panellists, I'm going to direct questions at panel members rather than ask everyone to answer everything, because otherwise we'll only get one round of questions. I'm going to take questions in threes, and I want the first question, which is maybe Alan and maybe Simon. So the thing for me that's missing in that plan is any commitment to a green watchdog or green guardian. So I don't know if people know, sadly, Brexit means that we will be leaving the jurisdiction of the European Court of Justice, which means that there will not be a way of suing the government. So the cases which Simon is bringing, there will be no body which can fine the UK government for breaches in air quality. So it doesn't matter how bad and how neglectful they are, there will be nothing we can do about it. And it seems to me that one of the most important, and any form of Brexit which is on the table at the moment does not include a provision for that. So whatever is being sold to us, nobody right now cares about putting those things in place to protect our health. So it seems to me that that would be one thing that's glaringly missing from that document, which would be a really great Labour policy, is to have not just the watchdog that Michael Gove is proposing, but one which has actually got statutory powers to sue and fine the UK government and to spend that money on environmental improvement. So I just wonder if there's any thoughts about why that's missing from there. But anyway, let's have 2 more. Yes.
Oh, can you shout, because this is the only microphone.
Yeah, I'll shout. So one thing I wanted to bring up is a bit of an elephant in the room, which is urban car use. And I just wanted to bring up a couple of examples. There's one in South America and there's one in Europe. There's Quito and Ecuador built trolley buses, which allow them to eliminate diesel buses and massively improve the air quality there. Because being mountainous, it just trap fumes and all the rest of it. The other one is in Latvia and Turkey. They did a similar sort of thing. They built a system called trambus, which essentially is trams but without rails, so it's just trolley buses that are seekers. I wonder what the panel's thoughts were on electrification of mass transit by using more traditional means rather than relying on advances in battery technology.
I was just wanting to ask the councillors on the panel, do local authorities have the power to decide who can and can't park on the street, and can we use that as a means of reducing the willingness for residents to actually buy diesel and fossil cars?
And the third one? Yeah, in the middle.
Well, here in Liverpool, in Merseyside, and on the Wirral, we've got some really lovely open spaces in Greenbelt and quite lovely parks in Liverpool. Unfortunately, lots of our green open spaces now are being lost at a dramatic rate due to various developments. Liverpool, Merseyside have some of the worst lung problems and diseases in the whole of the country, and also dementia is increasing on Merseyside at quite a high rate. My mother's just died with that terrible disease. It has now recently been proven that pollution can affect the brain and actually partly contribute to dementia. But the thing is, what can you do as SERA to encourage the Labour Party to implement in their manifesto protection of our green belts and open spaces before it deteriorates any further? Because our local authorities now are allowing more and more developments. Now, I know...
Okay, we've got the question, thanks. I just realised it has to be men, so I'm going to ask the... I'll come to you in a sec, but there's a woman at the back. Can you shout really, really loud, because we can't hear you. No, louder. Or come forward. There you go.
Well, I shouldn't be here because it's only my neighbour's brother's here spending 3 to 50 in work now. And I didn't know it's about being and I absolutely refute what this man says in Liverpool. Because what is happening, and I guess in all cities, and I have thought about the Labour Party all of this, I guess in most cities, and you know, the Labour parties have turned into Canelo and red wine. In this city, we are living in a divided city. The south end of the city has all the green spaces. Do not conflate green spaces with green belt. I'm totally in favour of green belt. But in this city, in the north end where I live, we are being choked to death with the plan, the local plan, and we're building the whole lot. And who has the voices? And I guess this is in every city. If Labour doesn't look at the grassroots, it will lose.
Okay, I think you've got an issue that you should raise with your local council, because this isn't about Liverpool at the moment. But thank you. We'll respond, but thank you. Okay. So, to begin, I mean, we've got a range of questions there. 9 points about Brexit, about electrification of urban transport, about parking, and also about green space, which I think is an important point. Who wants to begin? Do you want to say something? Do you care about
We love talking about parking as local councillors, and potholes and bins. They're our staple. So we can do a range of different things actually to try and encourage better car use. So, for example, we have residence parking permits, and we thought about the idea of actually charging more for more polluting vehicles and potentially offering free parking permits for electric vehicles. I have a toll bridge which goes into my ward, and we currently offer free toll for any electric vehicles. So there are things that councils can do to make trying to encourage that. Well, we've already done it, sir. So that's, I mean, this is what I think we need to get better aligned as cities to say, well, what can we do? What are you doing in Oxford that we can cannibalise and do, and vice versa? Somebody mentioned over there about car use and trams. I would love a tram. I'd love some form of electric mass transit. However, the last time it was done in Edinburgh, it overran significantly at a cost of £700 million. And on our own finances, it's just not possible. There is no way we have the money to do that ourselves as a city. We're working with our LEP to try and look at what range of options we have got available to us, because we can use the existing infrastructure. So in Southampton, for example, Portsmouth is just 20 miles away, yet it will take you 40 minutes on a train to get to Portsmouth, which is absolutely crazy. We should have a high-speed link between the two cities. Both of those cities are the powerhouse, the economic powerhouse of Hampshire and the surrounding area. So we need to, I think, utilise the existing infrastructure to its fullest, electrify all of the train lines. Why have we still got diesel trains? Why are we not exploring rail freight to a better way than we already are? For example, in the port, we have a lot of rail freight that comes in, but government has slashed the subsidies. Like as Alan was saying, the left hand doesn't know what the right hand's doing in government. On the one hand, I'm getting angry letters from Teresa Coakley. I'm sure we'll make it out. But on the one hand, she's chastising us, yet her government is then slashing rail subsidies, which means more HGVs on the road. It doesn't make any sense. So we need to get a better view of this, and I think we need to explore the existing infrastructure to its fullest.
I just want to add one point to that, which is we do a lot of bashing of Tories, quite rightly, but I want to have a go at the Lib Dems, really. It's a very Oxford problem. So the question of, thankfully just Oxford, the question of parking, I think, is an interesting one, because in Oxford we do lots of world's first, and it's world first this, world first that. It can be a little bit scary to some people legitimately. They see a lot of change and they wonder how to figure that out. But then there's people who just resist change for political reasons. And the Lib Dems will talk on and on and on about how they want to save the planet, they want to clean up the air. They really do care. But at the same time, they will then mobilise residents to go into public meetings to resist efforts to install charging infrastructure, which they think will take away from parking bays, when in fact it will not take away from parking bays. So the point I want to make there is that if we think that we can call on progressive parties in order to mobilise the campaign against clean air, against dirty air, sometimes you're really not going to be successful. And that's a terrible reception, sorry.
Philip, is there anything we can do about this noise? Is it related to Tom specifically? It was when you mentioned Lib Dems, they've intercepted with it, okay. And I've lost now the train of the discussion. Who would you... Yeah.
I'll come in on your point about the lack of a regulatory body. So I think, and Alan can say if I've got it wrong, that comes in the Clean Air Act. So one of the key planks of the Clean Air Act is the setting up of a Clean Air Committee in parallel with the Climate Change Committee, which is the regulatory oversight of the Climate Change Act. So I haven't read Alan's document, but in the version of the Clean Air Act, which we've been promoting through the APPG, one of its key planks is that independent oversight. And I agree with you that I think it's really important. So if it's not there, maybe we should do it more.
Well, firstly, Helen's right, although this is 2 lines on Clean Air Act in this particular document. But there's also the question that this document has taken quite a long time in putting together, and I think it's become apparent as things have progressed that Michael Gove has no intention of introducing any sort of environmental oversight and watchdog body that has any teeth at all, and quite the opposite of the case. He actually now wants to introduce one, such as it is, that actually will probably allow for the wholesale dismantling of environmental protections without any comeback for anybody. And I think that, if I can speculate, the true awfulness of what that is about to look like had not yet been fully revealed. But clearly, we need absolutely to have a body which actually can enforce enforce upon itself the highest standards, and not a body which actually stands by while those standards are slip away and are disintegrated.
Okay. Does anybody else want to comment on this? Should we take a... So, I'll take...
Could you answer my question about the green belt and open spaces?
I'll answer it. Okay, right. I'll answer it, because it's not just about Liverpool, it's about everywhere. All local authorities have to make a local plan. They also have to build more homes. That's just a reality. That's just reality. I mean, we can fight about it, but that's just the reality. More people need more homes. More people live longer. They like to live more. We just need to have them, right? The argument about the green belt is not one for me, but I can tell you the local authorities are absolutely need to, when they're building their homes, make sure that they are not exacerbating air quality by building in parking spaces without thinking about that, the way that they design it and connect it up. You need to be thinking about, when you build homes, wherever you build them, are they close to proper transport? Can people walk to the places they need to go? Have you got cycle paths and cycle storage? If you are going to put any parking in at all, has it got electric car charging points? Because there is really no way, if we are going to deal with the kind of population growth that is going to happen in this country, wherever you choose to put those homes, you need to have that infrastructure. And that infrastructure needs to be the kind of thing that the developers are obliged to factor in to all of their needs, because that's important. Now on green spaces, which I will make that distinction between that particular thing, green spaces and green belt, we need to have green spaces wherever we live. The people who live in built-up urban areas like Toxteth and places like that here deserve to have pocket parks and places to be able to sit under a tree and have a bit of peace and quiet as much as anybody who lives on the Wirral. That's just a fact. And that's why you need to have really progressive leadership who is saying, how do we make these cities livable? They need to have, tackling the urban heat effect that Niall's been talking about, that's really crucial. But this is also about your mental health. People in Hackney have seized AstroTurf and just put it into a parking space and said, this is our park. Now, entertaining that kind of guerrilla activity to begin with, you can imagine the council just went, the computer says no, that's not allowed. What's happened now? We started facilitating it. And you have people developing pocket parks in places where otherwise they wouldn't see any green. And that is what is really important. This is good for our mental health, and we also need to be able to balance that with the fact that the biggest driver of people's anxiety about mental health is not having a roof over their head.
Brownfield sites not being looked at on the...
Okay, I think, and just from SERA's perspective, we represent our members and we enable our members to campaign. So we have a number of local groups around the country, and if there's an issue which the local community, the local SERA members feel strongly about, then we support them in taking that up. So this is not something it wouldn't be appropriate for us in London to start a campaign in Liverpool, but it's certainly something, if there were local members who wanted to take that up, then that would definitely be the way to go. Okay, great. So I'm going to look at this side of the room because I haven't looked at that side. So the lady there first, then the man there, and the man there. There you go, those next three.
Jenny Rathbone, I represent Cardiff Central in the Welsh Assembly. We have an active travel act, we have a Wellbeing of Future Generations Act, but when it's not convenient, we ignore it. We're at the moment discussing whether or not we're going to expand the capacity of the M4 by spending £1.5 billion on 14 miles of road, which will just worsen the congestion coming into Cardiff and Newport. I've been battling this for several years. I'm hopeful that the change of leadership we're about to have in Wales will change that, but it's about a wholesale change in the way we think about things, that this euphemistically known as school run has to stop. We have to have active travel plans for each school to ensure that children who sign up to go to XYZ school also know that they've got to walk to that school because it's in the benefit of the children. How many of the MPs in the House of Commons have supported the Chancellor of the Exchequer's tentative idea of increasing fuel duty, which is an environmental levy and which will also make people think a little bit more about using the car for short journeys when it could just be walking?
Yeah, I think she stole my question a bit. I was going to ask about what's the panel's future opinion about active travel. We've heard a lot about getting buses and electric cars. Obviously, another car is going to cause congestion as well. So, how does active travel kind of play into this? Can I ask another small question as well? If more electric cars are going to be be on our roads, and we're having charging points. I've seen pictures of charging points installed on pavements, which are actually making pavements smaller and unwalkable. So how is that going to factor in well in charging points?
Okay.
My question was about whether any of the panel think that hydrogen has a role in helping to provide a solution there. I'm Programme Director for the Growth Deal. The three smallest Scottish councils are working on Orkney, Shetland and the Western Isles, and in Orkney at the moment they are dealing with the problem actually that Chris and Alan was referring to about diesel pollution from ships by using marine generated renewables to create hydrogen, which is currently powering a number of their ferries when they're in the ports in order to reduce emissions. And the next phase of that is about actually powering those ferries between the islands using hydrogen. So I just wondered if that was part of the solution.
Okay, very interesting questions. I'm conscious of the time, so what I'm going to do is move along the line and maybe have the last remarks as well. I'm really sorry, we're just running out of time. So I'm just going to move along. If you've got something to say in response to any of the questions, if not, just final comments, if not, just pass the microphone on. I'm going to start at that end and move back.
I have no real answer. I think it's for somebody else to probably take those on. So I just want to say thanks to everybody for listening from my side.
That was short.
I think the hydrogen question, I would say, is a really good example of how we've been used to everyone having the same answer everywhere to these things, and that's much less likely to be the case. When Chris says we need to have consistency across the country, particularly for businesses, think about the risk of somebody saying, yeah, we're going to rock up and we're going to put your distribution centre outside of your city. Oh, no, we're not. When you've got a big charging zone, we're going to move to another city. Oh, but they might charge something slightly different. How easy is it going to be able to work to travel between Liverpool, Manchester, Bradford and Leeds if they all had different levels of charging zones? For a small business or even for a big one, that's going to cause trouble. However, when you have particular geographical challenges, like you will have in Orkney and so forth, you will have to think about a different kind of technology. What's most important about this is that I've noticed a lot with environmental campaigners, particularly around clean air and climate, is that we get really, really tied up in the technology. And I'll tell you the two barriers now to us being able to crack this stuff is politics and money. So by all means, make sure the engineers get the money to be able to develop the ideas. We have so much proven technology that could do this, that we now need to be thinking much more in that space. And so I would say when we talk about things like, for example, what's happened in South America with trolley buses, sometimes we tend to think about the answer before that we recognise, rather than thinking about trying to work out the solution to the problem we've got now. Nobody would have invented the sharing economy until we had the digital technology to be able to do it. And it's given us, it's created an enormous number of problems because of the number of Ubers that are floating around London creating more of the air quality. But doesn't mean that that unintended consequence can't be tackled in another way. So I would just urge people, the politics of this is about everybody in this room telling the people that elect them that this matters to them. That is fundamentally, while we still believe in it, while we still are in a democracy, that is the best way to do this. And this is absolutely a public health crisis of our time. So please, I urge you, remind everybody who is accountable to you that they need to be able to act on this.
I can't say something about hydrogen. Hydrogen can be the cleanest fuel out or one of the dirtiest fuels out, and that sounds a bit of an odd thing to say. And not only can it be one of the cleanest fuels out, it can actually do lots of different things. So you can inject hydrogen into the gas system to displace mineral gas. and make sure that the gas system is lower carbon and cleaner. Obviously, we power vehicles from hydrogen, and certainly it's extremely unlikely that we are going to get electric trucks, electric logistics services in the long term. You could have hydrogen logistics services. You could have complete hydrogen areas. Bobby's pointed out different horses with different courses. You could have complete hydrogen rigs. It's unlikely you could have a complete hydrogen system across the country for gas supply and power. But all of that is predicated on how you make the stuff. And if you make it by the current system, which is steam methane reformation, you make it basically out of cracking gas into hydrogen and CO2. And that seems to rather sort of take you back to where you started from in terms of the overall pollution outputs and the overall carbon outputs. So you've got to do it by electrolysis. And if you do it by those means, and you do it by, for example, using the marginal electricity that is constrained at present by government, because sometimes it's too much the system, sometimes it's not, combining it with renewable energy in that way, you've got a really good potential future product which can, is absolutely clean. There are no particulates, there's no NOx, there's nothing. So it is potentially the fuel of the future, provided you do it in the right way.
So just comment on the active travel point. So in London there is lots of brilliant work going on active travel, in part due to the Mayor's commitment and investment in cycling infrastructure. So I'm actually doing that in a very, very different way to Boris Johnson. Boris Johnson was all about the big gesture on cycling infrastructure. Sadiq understands properly that this is about interventions in communities. It's not about routes that drive through communities, it's about placemaking and living streets and all of that stuff. So I think that agenda is working very, very well. In my constituency we've got parents who are closing the street outside their school to do play streets with a message about active travel, and we've got some really good work on cycling as well. But it's about hearts and minds, and my experience as an elected representative, both when I was on the council and as an MP, is that the interventions that you make to facilitate active travel can be amongst the most contentious in any communities, and that's where the kind of politics gets in the way. So I come back to the point about political leadership from the top. When councils are required to do things and resourced to do them, that makes their job easy. So if there's a requirement around active travel and targets that they have to hit, and they're resourced properly to do the community engagement that gets you the hearts and minds, that gets people, it builds a consensus around this agenda, then they are much more empowered to do that job. But for as long as we have councils, struggling to resource even their essential services, we still won't be making the change, and the change will be left to the community to pick up and to do what they can, and we can do so much more.
Just to build on the active travel, I think it's incredibly important that we encourage walking. One of the things that the Beast on the East showed us in Southampton is that people got out and walked because they couldn't move their cars. And a number of people wrote to me afterwards and said, do you know what, I've just carried on walking now because I realise it's not that far to get to work, and it was a lot quicker on some of our most congested roads, funnily enough. Everybody's already doing it, everybody's already walking in some form of capacity. The technology actually is there to try and encourage it. I'm wearing a smartwatch now, I've done 17,000 steps. I do go to a lot of fringe events and walking around. I don't usually do that many, but it's there. But we need to make sure as leaders and part of urban planning that we make sure that we have got mixed and balanced communities so that you have workspaces near recreational spaces, near homes. That is so crucial because we can't have a situation where everybody has to travel into the city centre. Because when you're outside of places like London and some of the big cities, the travel infrastructure is so poor and the public transport is so poor. In some cases, in some parts of my city, you can get a bus in on an hour. That's just not feasible for a lot of people. Convenience is always king. So if we can encourage walking, I think we're a lot better off. I was going to mention just a few things on hydrogen, but Alan gave us, I think, a far more comprehensive thing than what I was going to talk about. But just a point, private cars and hydrogen, let's just forget it. Let's just forget it. I mean, logistics, I think there's a legitimate case there, but the industry, the private car industry, the motor industry, have adopted electric as their mainstay, and they've got a model for each car, an electric. I think if we were to say, well, hold on, let's wait for hydrogen to see if that's feasible, I think we'll be going back about 7-8 years. Let's push heavily on electric with government subsidies, with charge points. Councils are slowly getting the message that that's what we need to be doing, and we're doing it. So now if we have to look at trying to encourage hydrogen in the private cars, I think that will set us back. But I do take your point on shipping and HGVs. I think that could be something really exciting. But again, we need that national leadership and the grants available to us to push that in a significant way, because councils like mine have not got the expertise and the ability to try and push that, work with the industry without that government support.
Thanks. On active travel, yeah, you're right. I think what we haven't mentioned tonight is that if we're really going to clean up the air in our cities and towns, then people are going to have to, there's going to be less vehicles on the road. But I just wouldn't call it active travel because I don't know what that means, and it's just gobbledygook. On schools, you're completely right. We're going to be launching a national children's programme. I think this issue now is so serious that you need a proper programme that's going to be dedicated to this and looking at this properly now, because you can't have a situation where kids are sitting in their playgrounds or in their classrooms being affected by the air that they're breathing. So you're right, but I would also add that the Welsh Government has been absolutely hopeless on air pollution. Sort of the dog has eaten their homework about 3 or 4 times now. So we're due a plan in November, which I hope will be good and stand up to the test of protecting people's public health.
Thanks. Just 3 quick points. The first is we need to spend as much money in the UK per head on cycling as the Netherlands does. It's absolutely ridiculous that we're so far down the road to we're in 2018 and we're just not doing that. The second thing is bus travel is too expensive. It's way too expensive, particularly for families. So we can talk about how we electrify buses and we try and make sure that the vehicles on our roads are as zero emission as possible, but we also need to get more people into the buses by reducing the prices, which needs the Labour government. And then the third thing is to talk about the question from the chap in the corner about street clutter. You're completely right. It's not just it's not necessarily an impairment that can disable a person. It's also attitudes and spaces and so on. And so in Oxford we're looking at on-street charging, which is pop-up. So we're trialling 20 charges now, which reduces that clutter, makes sure that buggies and wheelchairs and so on can pass along the pavement.
Thank you. So, yeah, that brings this evening's session to an end. So thank you all very much to the panel for such interesting contributions, and well done everyone for your recent investment. Please come back tomorrow, because we've got more events, and I'm not chairing any of them, so there's a chance that they'll end on time tomorrow. So I hope to see everyone back tomorrow.
Thank you.